to the No Such Thing as the News US election special. Coming to you from up the creek in Greenwich, London, my name is Dan Schreiber, and I am sitting here with Anna Chazinski, Andrew Hunter-Murray, and James Harkin. The big news today is that Donald Trump is going to be the next president of the United States of America. It's happened. It's happened. It's fucking happened. So, to give you a breakdown of what's going to happen and what has happened in the last week's news, we're going to start with Andy.
My fact is that last week, President Trump's campaign executive's pants literally caught fire as he was writing a speech for Trump. This guy called Steve Bannon, and he was standing next to a hot light bulb while he was working on auto-cue script for Trump, and he sort of noticed, guys, my trousers are on fire. So it's kind of the perfect metaphor for the entire campaign, yeah.
That's incredible. So this is Steve Bannon.
Yeah.
He works for a thing called Breitbart. They have a big website. They're a news reporter, very conservative. Quite an incredible character, this Steve Bannon guy. He's partly funded by the sitcom Seinfeld. Yeah. He did a deal back in the day, and as a result, he gets royalties. And it's the biggest show in terms of royalties around the world.
I am currently watching a box set of Seinfeld.
You are funding Trump.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah? Oh, but it's so breezy. I didn't mean to fund racism.
This is why illegal downloads are the way to go, Andy.
So this has been a sort of a long-running feature of the campaign, is that Trump has not told the truth whenever there's possibly been a way that he could avoid it. And so just before the end of the campaign, the Toronto Star newspaper, their Washington bureau chief is a guy called Daniel Dale, and he measured every single mistake or falsehood that Trump had made or claimed or said. He found 494 different ones, and he categorised them. And the four biggest categories were Clinton's policies, Clinton's corruption, polls, and WTF, which was things that Trump would have no reason to lie about, but still did.
Do you have any examples?
I have a lot of examples. Falsely claimed Al Wilson wrote the song The Snake. Falsely explained the pronunciation of Nevada. Falsely claimed the room he was speaking in was 100 degrees. Said of John Kerry, the only time he walked was to be in a bicycle race where he fell and broke his leg. And also, now they're calling me Mr. Brexit. And on that one, I did myself fact check, and no one called him Mr. Brexit before he did.
Wow.
Do you know, I'm really glad you mentioned bicycle races, because Trump's got a strong history in bicycle races, and in many other things. But in 1989, he hosted a bicycle race called the Tour de Trump. And it was...
Just cycling over his mounds of flesh for days.
What?
We were all thinking it?
Anyway, in Colorado, the year before, there'd been set up another bike race called the Tour de Rump. And the logo for that was someone with a big bottom, and I think it was maybe about losing some weight by cycling. And Trump obviously tried to sue these people and get them to stop using the Tour de Rump, because he claimed that that was copyright infringement. And so he wrote them quite an angry letter, actually, or his lawyers did, saying, unless you give us your written assurance within 24 hours that you will forthwith cease, then we will institute legal action against you, against the Tour de Rump. And they didn't, and the Tour de Trump went out of business 2 years later, and the Tour de Rump is still going. We're really desperately cheering anything at this point.
But he does sue anything, doesn't he? I read an account of him suing an author who claimed that he was a millionaire. And he said, I'm not a millionaire, I'm a billionaire. So he sued him. Yeah, and he sued him for $5 billion. Which obviously the judge threw out, but he made that attempt.
So Hillary, of course, would have been the first female president had she got in. But Donald has a few records that he's got.
Okay.
He's the oldest first-time president. because he's, I think, 70 years old, isn't he? He's also the fattest president in 100 years. He is 236 pounds, which makes him the heaviest US leader since William Taft. And that's the William Taft who had to have a special larger bathtub installed in the White House, one that could fit 4 ordinary men and was described as having pond-like dimensions.
Obviously, there was that whole thing of when the possibility of Trump going into power was a threat at the time, now a reality. A lot of celebrities said, if this happens, I'm going to leave the United States. And I'm really curious to see now if any of those celebrities do. One, Samuel L. Jackson, who said he was going to go to South Africa. Then there was also Barbara Streisand, who said she was going to go to either Canada or Australia. And lastly, Katie Hopkins said she's going to go to the United States of America.
So Donald Trump is the best golfer to ever become president, according to him. He claims to play off 2.8 his handicap, which is very good, actually. But Sports Illustrated said in an article that he admitted cheating and he has never published an independently verified scorecard or his taxes.
Can I just tell you one thing that the Trump presidency is worst for? Various animals, because if the wall between America and Mexico ever went up, that has a massive knock-on effect on loads of species that can't crossbreed across the border. So if that wall goes up, things like bighorn sheep, desert bighorn sheep, would have much lower genetic diversity. Also black bears. So we have a picture of a black bear that is found in Mexico here, that kind of thing. So their genetic diversity would decrease.
I mean, he seems to be doing quite well for himself.
That's actually William Taft's farm.
But the worst is pygmy owls. Pygmy owls can't fly very high, so the wall, which would be at least 10 metres, according to Trump's statements, would mean that they all crashed into it or are unable to fly over it, because the maximum height at which about 75% of them fly is 4 metres. And so pygmy owls wouldn't be able to breed across that border, their genetic diversity decreases, and it's a disaster. So that is why.
They can't breed with each other, they go into 2 separate directions, they turn into 2 different species, and we got 2 new species of pygmy owls.
That is the classic Trumpist that I can't stomach.
So, unfortunately for Hillary, obviously, she's not now going to be the first female president, unless she runs again, which she definitely will. But she has got a few other firsts, which she should be very proud of. For example, she's the first female politician to win a Grammy for her audiobook, It Takes a Village. And Barack Obama has won a Grammy, so has Jimmy Carter, so has Bill Clinton, in fact.
I think the only Democratic candidate not to have won a Grammy since 1992 is John Kerry. And he had one dedicated to him in 2004 by Coldplay, but it's not the same.
You know that Hillary won the Nickelodeon 2016 Kids Pick the President, Kids Votes. She won it with 53% of the vote. It's a really nice idea. They said to kids, if you were going to vote one of these people as president, who would it be? And they did go for Hillary.
Well, it's pretty scary that 47% of kids are voting for Trump.
No, it wasn't. It was 36% for Trump. Gary Johnson got 11%. It's a huge amount, but this was over 905,000 children who voted in that Nickelodeon election. Yeah.
Wow. And did she spend more time campaigning for that one or this one?
Here's another first. She was the first female politician, American female politician, to have their face used to rob a bank. And if you've seen the movie Point Break, there's the whole thing about the Richard Nixon mask, and that was associated with robbing banks. And so back in 2010, Hillary was also used for a bank robbery. We have a photo here. That's her robbing a bank there.
Are we quite sure that's a mask? I mean, crooked Hillary, I'm not saying.
One thing we found out this week is that she carries a ninja squirrel with her wherever she goes. Yeah. Which is not a Secret Service thing. It's a particular kind of sauce. She very much likes very hot sauce and sort of fiery peppers and things, because she says it keeps you healthy when you're campaigning, you're travelling around hundreds of miles. During the campaign, they asked Clinton what she took with her everywhere, and she said, I always have extremely hot, fiery sauce, and there's a particular kind called Ninja Squirrel that she likes.
So she said this in the primaries, in this Time interview. So immediately they asked Bernie Sanders' spokesman, does he use hot sauce as well? And his spokesman responded, his bold ideas are his hot sauce.
Did you know that there is a Donald Trump hot sauce that you can buy? This is Donald Trump sauce. And there's a review of this online. It's 5 stars, and it says, this hot sauce, it's just the best. The absolute best, folks. Do we love our hot sauce? We do. We love it. We really do. Look, I know hot sauce. I own several hot sauces. I have the best sauces. And I'm telling you that this hot sauce is the best. Just the best hot sauce around.
Does it turn out this whole election has been about who loves hot sauce the most? Because she did have, when she was in the White House with Bill Clinton, who was former president, she had 100 bottles of hot sauce, of different types of hot sauce that she kept in her kitchen.
And she was known on the campaign for just eating raw jalapenos.
Yeah, her aides say they have to carry those around with them all over the place as well. They always have to have chilies and jalapenos as well. Amazing. So Hillary hasn't always been Democrat, has she? So she started out as a Republican, came from a Republican family, campaigned for the Republicans for Barry Goldwater when she was very young, so she was too young to vote. But Barry Goldwater sort of restarted the whole conservative movement in America, really, didn't he? And apparently she had a hat which had Barry Goldwater's little symbol on it, which is AUH2O, which is quite clever, whatever you think of his politics.
She's not the only one to change sides, though, because Trump, between 1999 and 2012, Trump changed sides 7 times.
7 times?
Yes.
Wow.
So he was a Democrat, and then he ran for a little sort of offshoot party in 2000, and then he changed back.
Yeah, it was the Reform Party in 2000,
Reform Party.
wasn't it?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, we have just been told that we now have a new First Lady, Melania Trump. And I don't actually know too much about Melania Trump, so I started looking into it. And what I discovered is that she has a grandfather who invented an onion. Just a whole new onion. It's called a Raqqa red onion.
She's married an orange, so it's kind of there's love in the family for vegetables.
No, so she obviously grew up in Slovenia, and her grandfather was very much a part of agriculture, and he bred 2 different onions together by accident and produced this new onion, and it's a very famous onion now. It's so interesting because everyone has been talking about this election, and I don't think I know much about Melania Trump. And
Well, she's been very quiet, hasn't
Yeah.
she? A lot of people said, I think, Ivanka, his daughter, was almost his, like, surrogate wife during the campaign. She is.
He'd like that, wouldn't he?
Is.
I mean, he has said...
He's on the record.
He's on the record as saying if it wasn't his daughter, he would date her.
He did. Do you know Melania is the least popular First Lady in the White House since Hillary Clinton, actually?
She.
So that's something that they can bond over. So on Trump's family, his daughter, Ivanka Trump, is she...
It sounds rude now you've said it like that.
Like a character out of Austin Powers, but I think it's just her name. So she did an advert this week, a campaign ad for him, and it was supposed to appeal to kind of women who Trump was having trouble appealing to, and who might...
You mean women?
All women.
It was supposed to appeal to 100% of women. And apparently, this is in the same New York Times article as Andy's initial facts, but apparently she discouraged the news media from doing press releases about the fact that she'd done this advert because she owns a bunch of businesses and runs a bunch of businesses, and she was worried that the association with Donald Trump's name might be bad for her business.
Oh, no.
It's a bit late for that, isn't it? Well, on the Trump name, and Melania Trump was originally Melania Knaus, but when Trump met Melania, this was at a party in 1998, and Trump had arrived with the woman he was then dating, who was a Norwegian cosmetics heiress called Selena Middlefart. And had they married and double-barreled their names together...
So we almost had Bill Clinton become the first gentleman of the White House. That's not happening now, but I decided to look into a bit about Bill Clinton. I discovered one thing. In all the email scandals that have been going on with Hillary, I worked out that Bill Clinton was actually the first American president ever to send an email from the White House. And the email read, "Bill Clinton, time to come home for lunch. From Hillary." That was from Bill Clinton.
Why?
Okay, so the thing is that he was in the White House and they wanted to test out whether or not his email system was working well. So they sent him across the road, Bill Clinton, the president, to the Eisenhower building, where he sent himself an email back at the Oval Office. And he thought, well, I'll send it as if it's from Hillary. So he wrote himself an email from Hillary, then ran back to the Oval Office, opened up his account and was like, hey. And that was the first email that he ever sent as president. Bill Clinton, famously said that he only ever sent 2 emails while he was in the White House. And looking into it, it sounds like there actually were a few more emails that he sent.
I don't think the Clintons have a problem with email.
I was thinking as well, he's written this from Hillary. Maybe Hillary genuinely is like, I didn't have emails. It's just been Bill this whole time. It's weird because I was looking into who's had scandals within the Clinton family. And it's kind of everyone. It's really weird because obviously, so Hillary and Bill have been involved in many scandals over their career, the emails being the latest. Chelsea Clinton has actually been involved in a scandal to do with her wedding and the Clinton Foundation. That's all alleged because it's WikiLeaks. No one's confirmed that. Roger Clinton, the brother of Bill Clinton, involved in scandals. He was such a scandalous guy for them and such a pain in the ass, apparently, for them as well, that you know how the Secret Service has code names for each person who goes into power? So Hillary was Evergreen and is Evergreen again. Bill was Eagle. Roger Clinton was Headache.
In Lonoke County, then people didn't have the option to vote for Hillary Clinton in this election, but they did have the option on their ballot papers to vote for Hillary Clinton.
Wow.
And this was a typo that got onto the ballot papers, and it was too late for them to reprint them. And so anyone who wanted to vote for Hillary Clinton did actually have to put a cross next to the name Hillary Clinton.
Wow. Because that was on, you could go, if you went to Donald Trump's website, you could buy Hillary Clinton T-shirts. That was a big thing.
There are conspiracy theories about that. And actually, of all conspiracy theories I've ever heard, it's one of the most plausible that someone tampered with that to make it Hillary Clinton.
Although there is a thing about the money in the politics. So they both have foundations, Trump and Clinton. And it's been discovered that Donald Trump has donated money to the Clinton Foundation, made large donations to it. He has donated to the Clinton Foundation more recently than he's given any of his own money to the Donald Trump Foundation. Wow. He gave money to the Clintons in 2009, and he hasn't given himself any money since 2008.
In Missouri, they voted on whether or not to curtail the influence of money in politics. And the sole donor to the Yes campaign is one guy called Fred Sauer, who gave $1.5 million to help it pass.
Well, there is because lots of states have different votes that are happening all at the same time, so it's really complicated. So, for example, if you live in Los Angeles for this election, you will have received a 224-page voting guide, as well as a 96-page LA guide. And people are having to vote on all kinds of things. So they're voting on plastic bags, and they're voting on whether porn actors should have to use condoms. And that's for the second time in a decade that they're having to vote on that.
And in Colorado, slightly behind the times, they've just voted on whether or not to abolish slavery.
Wow. What? Is the jury...
So this is a little clause in their constitution which says at the moment that there shall never be in this state either slavery or involuntary servitude except as a punishment for crime. And so they're voting whether or not to take that except out, as in you shouldn't, as a punishment for crime, be allowed to be enslaved. Whoa. So they have voted on whether or not to abolish slavery. Wow.
We heard some results 24 hours before the polls closed everywhere else in the country because of a weird law in New Hampshire. And what it is if you're in a community with under 100 people, they're allowed to just count everyone's votes, and they know how many people there are, so they just count them all, and as soon as they've got all the votes, they just release the results. There's a place called Dixville Notch.
I'm sure Trump got in trouble over that.
It has 8 residents, and it's really famous every election that it's the first people who get in their votes, and there it is. Wow. And you can see that Clinton got 4 votes, Trump got 2 votes, So there's 2 votes left. Gary Johnson, the Libertarian, got 1 vote. And there was a surprise write-in ballot for Mitt Romney, the 2012...
So actually, Mitt Romney, do you know who he said he'd vote for?
No.
So this was a thing he said jokingly earlier on this year, is that he's planning to vote for his wife.
What?
He said that he couldn't in all good conscience vote for either of the candidates, and so he said he'd probably, again, using his ability to nominate a writing candidate, vote for his wife. He said she'd be the ideal president. Oh, wow. Which is such a strong claim to make. I don't even know a single person who I would say would be an ideal president. I think.
Well, my wife would be pretty good.
Oh, yeah.
But the write-in thing is such an interesting thing. There was a case in 1978, and this is how sort of odd the rules are about the write-in. In 1978, the Republican nominee was arrested for murdering.
There's been a murder.
The Republican nominee was arrested for murdering the Democratic nominee. So what happened then is they took the Democrat's name off the ballot, but because the Republican hadn't been convicted yet, his name remained on the ballot, and they were the only 2 people who were ever on the ballot. So he was immediately in for the win, but then the wife of the murdered Democrat did a write-in and everyone voted for her instead. Yeah, the guy's name was Byron Low-Tax Looper. He changed his middle name from Anthony to, in brackets, the brackets are part of it, low tax. Yeah. He thought that would make people go, I should vote for the low tax guy. But then he did the murder thing.
You mentioned Gary Johnson, who was a Libertarian candidate, and this isn't the first time he's run as a Libertarian candidate. He also ran in 2012, but he only ran in 48 states in 2012, and one of the states he wasn't able to run was in Michigan, and this was totally bizarre. So this is because he initially decided to run as a Republican, changed his mind, so had to withdraw his Republican self in order to put forward his Libertarian self. But in Michigan, he was 3 minutes late to re-register as a Libertarian. So the deadline was 4 p.m. and he registered at 4:03 to be the Libertarian nominee. And so he wasn't allowed to run as a Libertarian. So they said, OK, you can't run in this state. And so then the Libertarians found another person called Gary Johnson who was a Libertarian and said, will you stand instead?
Wow.
This was Gary E. Johnson, a businessman from Texas, and who was like, yeah, fine, no, I'll pretend to be Gary Johnson so people in Michigan will cross my name thinking it's Gary Johnson. And very sadly, a committee of judges said that they weren't allowed to do that. But such spoil sports.
Because the E in it is just, it sounds just like a carry-on, so you could just say, it's Gary Johnson. And everyone would have been fooled. Would have got away with it. Guys, can we get to talking about the big election that's just happened? Palau.
Hello.
Palau has just had an election, and annoyingly, we thought there was going to be a result. It's so close, they have to wait for the overseas ballots to come in order to...
Palau is amazing. So the current president is running against his own brother-in-law for the presidency. They're 2 of the 4 candidates. It's Tommy Remengesau, who is president, and his brother-in-law is Surangel Whips, which is an exciting name. And... yeah, so Whips is married to the president's sister. And then they had a final debate. And Whips, the challenger, said in his final remarks, this is not about our family, but for Palau. And then in his final remarks, the president said, I beg to differ. Saying he was not only running on the issues, but he was running against his brother-in-law. Yeah.
So for people who don't know where Palau is, it's 800 kilometers east of the Philippines, and it's a string of islands. They're out there, and the voting itself is only about 20,000 and something people. It's not a huge population. So these 2 guys are literally going door to door to get votes, which is amazing. I think they could have actually, in the time, if they needed to, have visited every single house to speak to the people.
Yeah, so at the time that we're recording, then Remengesau has a lead of 78 votes. And it's all going to depend on postal votes. And one of the reasons that we don't know the result of this is because the post is so slow. There are 2,900 absentee ballots that are yet to be counted, and apparently they were sent out really, really late, only a week before the election, and the post is very, very slow getting from foreign countries to Palau. So your vote can now only be counted if it's accompanied by a complaint letter as to the lateness of when your ballot was received.
Not the only election this week, though, of course.
yes, yes.
There has been an election in Nicaragua,
Yep.
Yeah,
okay, where Daniel Ortega has just won a landslide victory.
apparently.
Yeah, apparently. Basically because all of his opposition groups have decided we shouldn't vote because we're not going to win anyway, and he's fixing the whole thing. That's what they've said.
Yeah.
But he's won a massive victory, and his wife, Rosario Murillo, has also been voted in as a vice president.
What
Yeah.
are the chances?
Which makes them the first husband and wife team to get to the top 2 jobs in any country since David Cameron and Nick Clegg.
We need to wrap up very shortly. Do you guys have anything before we do?
Yep. Bulgaria had an election this weekend in which voting was compulsory. They also had a referendum on whether voting in elections should be compulsory, in which voting was not compulsory.
The current Prime Minister, fantastic character. He's a former bodyguard. He is a football player still. This is him here. Yeah. Bokyo Borisov, and he plays in a second division football team still while he's running the country as Prime Minister. I mean, 2011, he won Footballer of the Year. The Bulgarian Footballer of the Year, which he annulled because he was like, I know what's going on here. And they gave it to a guy who plays for Manchester United. So, like, someone genuinely good.
Berbatov.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, that's it. That's all of our election facts. Just time to share with you some of the stories we didn't have time to get to during this show. And we're going to start with you, Anna.
So the Chicago Cubs won the World Series, and the last time they won it, they actually did so because of a mistake the opposing team made that was known as Merkel's boner. It is quite interesting, Merkel's boner.
Sure.
It's a good boner. It's one of the best boners. So what happened was, this was in 1908, the last time the Chicago Cubs won, and they won because they were able to defeat the New York Giants. And the way they did this was that the New York Giants actually really won. Like, they scored the winning rounder, as we would and so everyone flooded onto the pitch and was like, New York Giants have won, this is so great. And somebody noticed that the guy who was standing at first base hadn't gone to second base and tapped in. And that was Merkel, and he didn't do that. And as everyone had swarmed on, the opposition team noticed that, and so one of them threw the ball to his teammate and went and got him out.
No.
And, well, like, fans all over the pitch, and then that was ruled that they couldn't win, sadly. And so there was a replay, and then the Cubs won, and that was the last time they won. So you might argue that this is the first time they've properly won the World Series.
Amazing. Okay, Andy, what have you got?
My fact is that Vladimir Putin has just unveiled an enormous statue of a former Russian leader who happens, coincidentally, to be called Vladimir the Great.
And finally, James, what have you got?
Mine is about Andy Murray becoming world #1 this week. The last Briton to be world #1 men's tennis player would irritate his opponents by, when they hit a good shot, he would shout, "Very clever!"
Okay, that's it. That's all from me, Andy, James, and Anna. We'll be back again next week. This has been No Such Thing as the News. Goodbye. James Harkin.